The United States has a long and complex history with immigration. From early exclusionary acts targeting specific nationalities to mass deportations during the Great Depression, the US government has long exercised its power to remove non-citizens from its soil. The 1996 Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act significantly expanded the grounds for deportation, including for minor offenses. This resulted in a dramatic increase in the number of deportations, reaching record highs under the Obama administration. The Trump administration further intensified these efforts, adopting a hardline stance on immigration and prioritizing the removal of undocumented immigrants. While deportation has historically targeted individuals from Latin American countries, recent years have seen a rise in the deportation of Indian nationals. This trend reflects the changing demographics of undocumented immigrants in the US, as well as the tightening of immigration policies that have made it more difficult for Indians to obtain legal status. The deportation of Indian nationals has sparked controversy and outrage in India, raising questions about the human cost of US immigration policies. The Indian government has also expressed concern over the treatment of its citizens during deportation. The recent deportation of Indian nationals from the US has brought to light the often harsh realities faced by those removed from the country. Images and accounts of deportees, particularly men being shackled during flights, have sparked outrage and condemnation. Deportees face the prospect of returning to a country they may have left years or even decades ago, with their lives in the US abruptly cut short. The emotional toll of separation from family, friends, and the life they built in the US can be devastating. Human Rights Watch has condemned the practice, stating that it is cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment that is never justified. The organization argues that shackles are unnecessary and disproportionate, causing both physical and psychological harm to those subjected to them. The Indian government has also raised concerns about the shackling of its citizens during deportation, calling for a more humane approach. While the US government maintains that the use of restraints is a necessary security measure, critics argue that it is excessive and dehumanizing, particularly for individuals who have not committed violent crimes. In a bid to expedite the deportation of undocumented immigrants, the US has been actively engaging in diplomatic efforts with Central American countries, particularly Costa Rica. Costa Rica's role as a deportation hub is a recent development, reflecting the US government's continued efforts to expand its deportation program. The agreement between the two countries allows the US to send chartered flights carrying hundreds of deportees to Costa Rica, where they are temporarily housed before being repatriated to their home countries. Critics argue that using a third country as a transit point for deportation adds another layer of complexity and uncertainty to an already difficult process. The US has previously struck similar deals with other Central American countries, including Panama. These agreements highlight the US government's determination to increase deportations, even as it faces criticism for its handling of the process and the treatment of deportees. The deportation of Indian nationals from the US, particularly the use of shackles and reports of mistreatment, has sparked widespread outrage and condemnation in India. The Indian government has officially expressed its concern over the treatment of its citizens during deportation. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar addressed the issue in Parliament, acknowledging the US policy of shackling deportees as standard procedure, but assuring that India is working with the US to prevent mistreatment. However, the government's response has been met with criticism from opposition parties, who accuse Prime Minister Modi of not taking a strong enough stance with the US. They argue that the issue should have been directly addressed with President Trump during his recent visit to India. The image of shackled Indian citizens being deported from a country that many view as a land of opportunity has struck a nerve, fueling a sense of anger and betrayal. Section 5: Shackles and Social Media. Amplifying the controversy. The controversy surrounding the deportation of Indian nationals from the US has been further amplified by social media, where images and videos of shackled deportees have been widely shared and condemned. The immediacy and visual nature of social media platforms have brought the issue to the forefront. galvanizing public opinion and putting pressure on both the US and Indian governments. One particularly notable instance involved a video released by the White House showcasing the deportation process. The video, which showed shackled deportees boarding a plane, drew widespread criticism for its seeming lack of sensitivity and its potential to dehumanize those being deported. The video quickly went viral, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Adding fuel to the fire was a retweet by tech billionaire Elon Musk, who shared the video with a seemingly flippant comment. The incident highlights the power of social media to both inform and inflame public opinion. Section 6. Between welcome and removal, a history of Indian migration to the US. The recent tensions over deportation must be understood within the larger context of Indian migration to the United States, a history marked by both opportunity and exclusion. From the early pioneers who arrived in the late 19th century to the waves of professionals who immigrated in the latter half of the 20th century, Indians have contributed significantly to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the US. Early Indian immigrants faced significant challenges, including racial prejudice and discriminatory laws. The Immigration Act of 1917, which barred immigration from a large swathe of Asia, including India, effectively halted Indian immigration for several decades. It was only with the passage of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which abolished national origin quotas, that Indian immigration to the US resumed in significant numbers. The post-1965 wave of Indian immigration was largely driven by professionals seeking better economic opportunities and a higher standard of living. Despite their contributions, Indian immigrants, like other immigrant groups, continue to face challenges in the US. To Section 7. The price of security, balancing national security and human rights. The deportation of undocumented immigrants, including Indian nationals, raises complex and often contentious questions about the balance between national security and human rights. Proponents of strict immigration enforcement argue that deportation is necessary to protect national security, prevent crime, and maintain the integrity of immigration laws. However, critics argue that the current approach to deportation often comes at the expense of human rights. They point to the use of shackles on deportees, the separation of families, and the lack of due process in some cases as evidence of a system that prioritizes expediency over compassion and fairness. The challenge for policymakers is to find a balance between these competing priorities. While the need to protect national security is paramount, it should not come at the expense of fundamental human rights. This requires a nuanced approach to immigration enforcement that takes into account individual circumstances, respects due process, and prioritizes the well-being of all individuals, regardless of their immigration status. Section 8. A shared responsibility towards a more humane deportation system. As the deportation of Indian nationals from the US continues to spark controversy, it underscores the urgent need for a more humane and compassionate approach to immigration enforcement. This requires a concerted effort from both the US and Indian governments, as well as greater engagement from civil society organizations and the international community. The US government has a responsibility to ensure that its deportation policies are consistent with its international human rights obligations. This includes ending the use of shackles on deportees except in extreme circumstances where there is a clear and present danger. The Indian government, for its part, has a crucial role to play in protecting the rights of its citizens abroad. Beyond government action, civil society organizations and the international community have a vital role in monitoring the treatment of deportees, raising awareness about human rights concerns, and advocating for policy changes. Section 9, Echoes of Displacement, the Human Cost of Immigration Policies. The recent wave of deportations from the US serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of immigration policies. Behind the statistics and the political rhetoric lie the stories of individuals and families whose lives have been upended by deportation. These are stories of broken dreams, shattered families, and the enduring pain of displacement. For many deportees, returning to their home countries is not a homecoming but a new beginning, fraught with challenges. They may face stigma and discrimination, struggle to reintegrate into societies they left years or even decades ago, and face economic hardship as they rebuild their lives. The impact of deportation extends beyond the individual, rippling outwards to affect families and communities. The deportation controversy compels us to look beyond the political debates and acknowledge the human faces behind this issue.